All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Errol Spence Jr. Yordenis Ugas in a prediction that was made for the fight by Manny Pacquiao's trainer, Freddie Roach. Let's do that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. We are going to talk about the welterweight division, specifically Errol Spence Jr., Yordenis Ugas, and what Freddie Roach, the Hall of Fame trainer of Manny Pacquiao and many other fighters, had to say about the fight. But before I get into that though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are a subscriber that has been watching the videos, thank you so much for your support. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. If you are not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. Your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. So let's get into this. We've got a really big fight, good fight coming up in April 16th. We are about 3 weeks away from it. And that is Errol Spence Jr., the WBC and the IBF champion, fighting Yordenis Ugas, who holds the WBA super title, and a fight that I think is going to be a very, very good fight. I favor Errol Spence Jr. to win the fight. Many people have him favored to win the fight, but a lot of people really do appreciate, like myself, that it is a tough fight and that it is a fight that has the potential to go either way, depending on what's going on. However, Freddie Roach gives his 2 cents on it, so let me share what he said. And he was asked about a couple things relative to Errol Spence Jr. He was asked, first, what do you expect from Errol Spence Jr. in this fight with Yordenis Ugas, considering he had the car wreck, considering he had, a torn retina. And Freddie Roach, and then, so what's your outcome of the fight? What do you think will happen in the fight? Freddie Roach said that he does not expect anything to be different with Errol Spence Jr. in this fight, that from what he understands, Errol Spence Jr. is looking good, that he doesn't think the torn retina is going to affect him. He's just going to come out there and be the good, solid, fighter that he always is. And he expects Errol Spence Jr. to win the fight. He said that he thinks it's going to be a tough fight and a good fight, but he says that if he had to predict it, he would say that he thinks it could be a mid to late round stoppage in the fight for Errol Spence Jr. And that is the first time that I've actually heard anybody of Freddie Roach's stature actually predict a knockout for Errol Spence Jr. versus Yordenis Ugas. And the funny thing is that when Errol Spence Jr. was asked about whether or not he was going to knock out Yordenis Ugas, he himself cracked the joke. He's like, man, I don't know if I've knocked out anybody in a while. Right. And it's been a while since Errol has had a stoppage. I do believe his last stoppage was against Carlos Ocampo, which might have been in about 2018. After the Carlos Ocampo fight, he then stepped up the level of competition that he has and has fought guys like Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, and Danny Garcia. And those fights, did not wind up being knockouts. However, Freddie Roach says that he can see it and he expects that to happen against Yordenis Ugas. He said Yordenis Ugas, for his analysis of Yordenis Ugas, is that Yordenis Ugas is a tough fighter. He's a long fighter. He's very difficult to get to because of his range and all of that. Specifically that was his impression, I suppose, because of what happened with the Manny Pacquiao fight, where his charge, Manny Pacquiao, in the last fight lost to Yordenis Ugas. But presumably those same challenges that are there for Manny Pacquiao will not be there for Errol Spence Jr., seeing as Errol Spence Jr. is actually a bigger guy than Yordenis Ugas is. And when those guys faced off, that was one of the first things that I noticed. I was like, because just seeing Yordenis Ugas and not next to Errol Spence Jr., I kind of thought, just in my mind, I figured him, pictured him being a little bit taller, a little bit longer than than Errol Spence Jr. But when they stood face to face, that wasn't the case. You know, I might have been tricked by Yordenis Ugas lean. You know, the fact that he's very lean. He's definitely somebody that is not, he's not a big guy. I've seen him in person several times, and he's just, he's long and he's thin. Where Errol Spence Jr., looks to be a little bit more stocky than Yordenis Ugas, which I think is what kind of threw me off about my perception of their length. Typically, when guys are thinner, thinner guys, more narrowly built guys, they maybe look a little bit longer than guys that may be the same height, same length, but just has a little bit more muscle mass on them. And that's, I think, is kind of what threw me off about Errol Spence Jr. and Yordenis Ugas. For me though, I'm not gonna bet on a knockout, being the case. But if I was going to say how a knockout would come from Errol Spence Jr., I think that it may be, the fact that, if Errol Spence Jr. is able to consistently and successfully go to Yordenis Ugas' body and break him down, then I think maybe he could be able to get that, because Yordenis Ugas does, he does fit that physical description of guys that kind of have thin, a thin, narrow torso. Right, he's definitely got a big back, but his abdomen and all that is kind of thin, right? Similar to somebody that like a Sir Marcus Brown or a Julius Ndungo type of build, even though he's a little bit broader than your Julius Ndungo. And sometimes those guys that with those kind of thin builds in the middle, and especially in the abdomen, like a narrow abdomen, don't take body shots as well as guys that are a little bit bigger. At least that's been my perception from the outside looking in. So that may be an option for Errol Spence Jr. to get the stoppage. But me looking at the fight, I see a 12-round fight. And I see, just Errol Spence Jr. beating him on the scorecards, scoring, beating him to the punch on a consistent basis. But at the same time, it being, a legitimately tough fight. Yordenis Ugas, I think his mentality is strong. Now, one of the things that Errol Spence Jr. said about him was that, when Yordenis Ugas gets hit, Yordenis Ugas likes to mix it up, right? You can see that in the Sean Porter fight. You can see it in the Omar Figueroa fight. That whenever they got to banging, Yordenis Ugas is down to bang to the body and go at it on the inside. And when you do that with Errol Spence Jr., typically speaking, that is an advantage Errol Spence Jr. Now, the one time that I saw where it didn't really look like it was as much an advantage for him was when he was fighting Sean Porter on the inside. But I blame a lot of that to like the height differential between Errol and Sean Porter, where Errol was really having to try to get low, and you could literally see him bending his knees and really dropping himself, low, and to try to get underneath, Sean Porter, where Sean Porter's he's significantly shorter than Errol Spence Jr. is, and it looked like Errol had a little bit of difficult time to really getting in on that smaller, shorter, more compact stature, where Yordenis Ugas, that's not the case. Even if Yordenis Ugas is dipping down more, Yordenis Ugas is going to be available in his that area is more there to hit, and Errol Spence Jr. doesn't have to get as low to try to get to that body. But anyway, I appreciate the take of Freddie Roach. It very well may happen. I agree with him about the outcome. You let me know what you think, however, in the comment section. It would be greatly appreciated if you leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.